I was 8 months pregnant the night my husband's mistress pushed me off his yacht. One moment I was holding a crystal flute, smiling under golden lights, thinking this was a celebration of love. The next I was plunging into black ocean water, my lungs screaming, my unborn child kicking in panic. And as I watched the boat drift away, no one looking back, not even him, I realized something brutal. This wasn't an accident, it was an execution. He didn't just betray me, he erased me. My name is Naomi Whitaker. And this is the story of how I rose from the freezing depths. Not just to survive, but to destroy everything he built on my silence. Now I need to ask you something. Have you ever been pushed so far, so deep, that the only way out was to come back stronger? If you were me, would you forgive or would you make them pay? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, because the next chapter is where they learn what it costs to cross the wrong woman. Stay with me, it's about to begin. Before that night, I truly believed I was living a dream. My name is Naomi Whitaker. I was 31, a marketing director in Manhattan. Smart, independent, madly in love. Callum Montgomery was everything I thought I wanted. Elegant, charming heir to an old money empire. He made me feel seen in ways no one else ever had. We met at a book signing in Soho. He quoted Auden. I rolled my eyes. He laughed. The kind of laugh that cracked something open inside me. 2 years later, we were married. 2 years after that, I was pregnant. It wasn't a perfect marriage, but it felt like ours. Callum had a past, sure. Whispers of old flames, family tension, lawsuits. Quietly buried under wealth. But when he held me at night and whispered, "You're my anchor." Naomi, I believed him. I wanted to. We moved into his family's waterfront estate in Cape Harbor, Maine. The house was old money in every sense. Marble halls, velvet drapes, rooms that echoed secrets. But I filled it with light. I painted the nursery myself. Bought tiny boots for the baby, lit candles in every hallway so it would feel like home. At his suggestion, I took an early maternity leave. I thought it was sweet, thought he wanted me to rest. Instead, I started noticing the distance, the late meetings, the half-answers. Then came Denica. She was introduced to me as a family friend, a distant cousin from one of those obscure blue bloodlines. You only hear about when estates need dividing. Her presence was constant. Her perfume, sweet and expensive, lingered long after she left. She smiled too wide, touched his arm too often. I ignored it. Told myself I was being paranoid, hormonal, the classic line. But one night I caught her staring at me with something more than indifference. It was calculation. That's when the dreams started. Of drowning, of hands pushing me from behind. I'd wake up in cold sweats clutching my belly. Callum would say I was anxious, that the baby was making me paranoid, and I believed him. Because that's what trust does. It blinds you with comfort. But then came the gala. A private yacht, just a few close friends, he said. Just one last party before we became parents. I wore the gown he'd chosen, a deep emerald green that hugged my swollen belly. I tried to feel beautiful, whole. But something about the air that night felt wrong. Off-key, too still. The wind picked up as we boarded, and Denica. She was already there, laughing with Callum, a glass of champagne in her hand, dressed in white like a bride. And I realized I was the only one who didn't know what this night was really about. That's when I saw them whispering. Callum's jaw tight, her eyes cold. "We can't back out now," he murmured. "She'll be out of the picture soon enough," she replied. Something inside me broke in that moment. A quiet snap. Not fear, not sadness. Something deeper, something primal. I stepped forward, my voice shaking. "What are you talking about?" Denica smiled. The kind of smile that ends chapters. And then she pushed me off the edge into silence, into dark, into what was meant to be my grave. But I didn't die. I came back, and this time, they won't see me coming. The ocean didn't just take my breath. It tried to erase me. As the water swallowed me whole, I flailed heavy with life, drowning in betrayal. My gown tangled around my legs, dragging me deeper. I opened my mouth to scream, but the sea filled it first. Salt, cold silence. I remember the muffled echo of the yacht's motor growing fainter with every second. No one looked back. Not Callum, not Denica. No accident had occurred. This was orchestrated. I was disposable, but I wasn't done. In that icy dark, I saw flashes my baby's first kick the nursery. I painted the promises he made. I swore if I surfaced, I'd never be the same again. Then a jolt. A hand rough and urgent gripping my wrist. I broke the surface, gasping, coughing out salt and fury. A stranger pulled me aboard a weather-beaten fishing boat. No name, no questions, just calloused hands that kept pressing my chest. Until I breathed again, I clung to the edge of that boat, like it was the last truth I had. He never asked why I was there, just handed me a blanket. Eyes steady, voice quiet. You're alive. That's enough for tonight, but I couldn't rest. Not when I knew they'd be writing my obituary over champagne. They didn't want me dead for nothing. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to start. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of a steel door in Brooklyn inside Elias Ward Callum's half-brother, an investigative journalist, estranged, brilliant, ruthless, and once quietly in love with me. He didn't flinch when he opened the door. His first words. Why did you ever trust him? Inside his apartment was a war room, walls lined with photos, printouts, legal papers, red ink circled names, arrows between faces, in the center Callum and Danica and me. My death certificate hung in a frame. You were never supposed to survive, Elias said, and they've already moved on. He opened a folder, emails, signed medical reports, forged scans, a diagnosis I never received. A miscarriage that never happened. She's mentally unstable. One note read, baby non-viable. Another said, signed by a doctor who didn't exist. They planned it, Elias said. From the moment you got pregnant, but why? The answer was buried in a trust Callum's late father had made it ironclad. The first legitimate child born in wedlock would inherit 80% of the Montgomery estate. That child was mine. That's what Danica couldn't stomach. She could seduce Callum, even marry him if I disappeared, but she couldn't create an heir, not one that counted. They didn't need me dead. They needed me erased. Elias dug deeper. Financial records, shell companies, offshore transfers, all tied to my name. My identity, Danica had been laundering money through my accounts, posing as me, living in my house, using my scent, wearing my clothes. She even copied my handwriting in notes. Left on the nursery door, I wasn't just erased. I was being replaced. I stared at the footage Elias showed me, Danica barefoot in my robe, cradling a fake baby bump, waving at paparazzi on the very balcony where Callum once told me I was his forever. I didn't cry, I watched, I memorized, and I planned. Because now I didn't just want to return, I wanted them to see me. To feel the ground shift, to know they hadn't buried a ghost. They'd created a storm, and I was coming. The moment I crossed that invisible line between grieving widow and woman reborn, I felt it in my bones. This wasn't about healing anymore, it was about fire. I sat in Elias's apartment, surrounded by every piece of evidence he'd unearthed. The forged records, the emails, the wire transfers, the trust, the will. And then he slid a photo across the table. Danica younger draped over an older man in a velvet armchair, his hand on her thigh, a gold pendant around her neck. I stared. The man was Callum's father, the same man who died mysteriously just before Callum proposed. She wasn't just a threat. Elias said she was a secret that could destroy everything. Callum didn't marry Danica out of love. He married her to bury the past. But what buried me was worse. A silicone pregnancy belly, paid off doctors. Danica had created an entire lie, right down to fake ultrasounds. A fake heartbeat, fake tears. All of it just to claim my place, my money, my child's future. I clutched my stomach. My baby kicked. Not a ghost, not a rumor, a legacy. I pressed my hand to the life inside me and whispered, they tried to steal everything, but they didn't steal you. Elias wasn't done. He clicked on a final file, a video, hospital security footage, Danica dressed in scrubs forging records, Callum signing them, and then a voice recording. Callum's voice hushed and cruel. Just make sure she disappears before the baby comes. We'll take over everything. Every lie had a timestamp now. Every betrayal cataloged, sealed and ready. I could go to court, reveal everything. But Elias shook his head. Too soon, he said. They'll twist it, make you look unstable. Resurrect the diagnosis they planted. He was right. If I returned in rage, they'd paint me as a ghost with a grudge, a woman too emotional, too broken, too late. But if I returned in silence, I could burn them with truth, So we watched. We waited. The gala was coming, a grand event where Danica planned to announce her pregnancy to high society. Perfect a stage, an audience, a trap. Elias had a mask made, black diamonds, elegant, dangerous. My face would remain hidden, my eyes exposed. The storm doesn't knock, it arrives. On the night of the gala, I stepped into a car dressed in a gown I never got to wear. The one Callum picked out for our engagement party. My heels clicked like thunder. Inside the ballroom, I was no one and everyone. They called me Madame Azra, an investor. A mystery, Danica preened in silver. The bump beneath her dress was awkward, uneven. I circled the room once, silent, calculated eyes watching, whispers following. Then wine red poured at her feet, a stain that bloomed across silk like truth itself. Gasps, silence. Danica frozen, Callum dazed. I didn't run. I walked out slow, deliberate. Let them wonder. Let the fear settle in. Let the ghost become real. That night, Callum didn't sleep. Elias tracked his every move. Emails, phone calls, shredded paper. He was unraveling, and then came the envelope. Plain, no name. Inside, one line. Truth always returns. It wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. And I was ready to keep it. I didn't want revenge. Not the kind they expected. Not fire and fury, not yet. I wanted precision, silence. The kind of truth that doesn't just hurt, it undoes you. While Callum spiraled behind locked doors, I built my plan stone by stone, file by file, whisper by whisper. I moved funds from my trust, quietly. Bought silent shares in Callum's company under aliases Elias helped create. I studied boardroom habits, identified allies. Saw who laughed too loud at Danica's jokes, who flinched when Callum raised his voice. They were loyal, but only until the winds changed, and I was the storm. Then Elias handed me the flash drive, inside it the document. A trust left by Callum's father. One clause buried deep. The rightful heir to the Montgomery estate shall be the first child born in lawful wedlock to Callum Montgomery. No exceptions. My unborn child. Not Danica's phantom pregnancy, not Callum's cover story. Mine. Every lie, they told, every dollar they stole. It all pointed back to this. I finally understood. They didn't just want me gone. They needed me erased, legally dead. My child, a name never recorded. They didn't just betray me. They tried to delete me. I pressed my fingers against my belly. Not anymore, I whispered. Elias and I gathered more. We cracked medical servers, pulled hidden backups of my real scans. Real lab results, real heartbeat recordings. We found Danica's emails to private clinics, requests for prosthetics, fake prescriptions, even staged emergency visits for PR photos. The worst part, the press ate it up, tragic heroine, devoted partner. Strong woman rising from loss. They sold a story, now I'd give them a better one. The shareholders' meeting was set for the following Friday. Callum would be there. Danica, too, boasting about record profits. While the company's foundation was already cracking under the weight of their lies, and I'd walk in not as his wife, not as his victim, as the owner. The storm began with a mask, but would end with a name. My name, my legacy. Our final play was brutal in its elegance. First we leaked whispers, just enough to rattle nerves. Investors began asking questions. Stock prices dipped slightly. Enough to sting, enough to make Callum panic. He issued internal memos. Called emergency board meetings, but the damage had already begun, and I wasn't finished. I delivered anonymous packages to every major shareholder, copies of the trust financial inconsistencies recordings. No return address, just a single typed line. If you value the truth, show up Friday. Then, the night before the meeting, Elias slipped me the final key. The DNA results confirmed paternity, my baby Callum's child. The legal heir, proof. Unbreakable, undeniable, final. The truth was no longer whispered. It had teeth, and tomorrow it would roar. I didn't sleep that night. I stood before the mirror wearing the suit I was meant to wear when Callum first asked me to co-lead the company. He never followed through. Now I would. The moment my heels touched the marble floor of the skyscraper, the air changed. Receptionists froze. Assistants stared. Whispers rippled through the building. She's supposed to be dead. Is that Aurora? No, not Aurora. The storm you tried to drown. I walked into the meeting room. Silent, glowing, resolute. Every head turned. Callum's face lost all color. Danica paled. Her fingers gripped the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I didn't speak. Not at first. I let the silence carry my truth. Then, I reached into my bag, pulled out the recorder, and pressed play. Callum's voice filled the air. Soft, cold, calculated. She's just a burden now. Danica's followed. Make sure she disappears before the baby comes. Gasps. Shuffling. Someone dropped a glass. I pressed another button, a second clip. A fake doctor's visit. There's no heartbeat, Danica whispered. Fake tears in her voice. Then, another voice. But you were never pregnant. The room tilted, every eye locked on Danica. Then I dropped the envelope DNA test results. Signed trust documents, medical reports, truth. It was over, but it was also just beginning. Because now they had to choose lie and sink, or admit everything and drown slower. And I was done drowning. I was about to rise. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. The moment the envelope hit the table, the entire world seemed to pause. Danica's hand trembled as she reached for it, hesitated, and then recoiled like the truth might burn her fingers. Callum sat frozen. His jaw clenched, his eyes darting between the board, the press, and me. The silence was louder than any scream. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Truth doesn't beg to be heard. It simply is. I pulled out the last card. Photos, emails, financial records. Every gift Callum's father ever gave Danica, while she was still his mistress. A man old enough to be her father. A man she conveniently mourned while wearing jewelry he paid for. Gasps. Again. But it was the next words that cracked the foundation. She faked the pregnancy, I said softly. Used my stolen medical records to build a story. Eyes widened. She used a prosthetic belly. Asked clinics for fake ultrasounds. Built a nursery using my lists. My handwriting, no one blinked. She wasn't just pretending to be pregnant. She was pretending to be me. I let that sink in. She wore my scent. Slept in my bed, toasted champagne on the same yacht. She pushed me off, and then I looked straight at the cameras. She tried to erase me, but I survived. And now I am reclaiming everything. Danica tried to stand. She's lying, she shouted, but her voice cracked. Someone laughed in the back. One of the reporters, then the murmurs began. Board members huddled. Lawyers took frantic notes. The head of PR quietly slipped out the door. Callum finally spoke. Aurora. His voice broke. I didn't know it would go this far. I turned slowly. You pushed me into the sea. No, I thought, Danica. You let her, I whispered. You lit the match. She just dropped it. He looked away, shame blooming across his features. Then Elias stepped forward. He didn't speak. He just placed one final document on the table. It was Callum's father's will. Signed, stamped, and never filed. It left everything. To my child, not Danica. Not Callum. To me through the life inside me. The heir to the Montgomery Empire. You buried me to take what was already mine, I said. And then came the final blow. The board chair rose. He cleared his throat. We've seen enough. He turned to me. Miss Montgomery. Would you accept interim control of the company until the situation is legally resolved? The room spun. Callum staggered back a step. Danica dropped into her chair, her mouth hanging open. And me? I breathed. For the first time in months, I really breathed. Yes, I said I accept. A flurry of motion followed. The press exploded. Flashbulbs, screams, security moving in. But I stood still, silent, powerful, exactly how they never wanted me to be. As they escorted Danica out, kicking, crying, shouting that it was all lies, I looked her in the eyes and said the last thing I ever would tell the truth. For once, then she was gone. The cameras turned to Callum. He looked 10 years older, defeated, hollow. He stepped forward slowly. Aurora, he said, voice trembling. I didn't want this. I tilted my head. No. You just didn't think I'd survive it. He didn't deny it. And that silence, that guilty, irreversible silence, was everything. Security moved toward him, handcuffs glinted in the light. "No, wait," he muttered. "You can't do this to me." "I'm not doing anything," I said calmly. "You did this to yourself." He was escorted out in front of the same press that once praised him as a visionary. Now they called him fraud, murder suspect, heir thief. And I didn't smile, because justice isn't joyful. It's earned. The fallout was fast. Media networks ran the story for days. Pregnant heiress survives. Yacht attack reclaims empire. Fake pregnancy. Exposed in corporate takeover scandal. My face, my story. Finally mine again. But the most important moment came quietly. In a small office, a single judge. A stamp on a file. And one sentence: "You are hereby reinstated as Aurora Montgomery, sole legal guardian of the Montgomery estate." That day I walked outside into the sunlight, my baby kicking inside me, and realized they thought drowning me would be the end, but all they did was teach me how to breathe underwater. Months later, the world had moved on, but I hadn't. Not completely, because survival is not the same as healing. And revenge isn't the same as peace. The empire was legally mine, the shares, the assets, the title. But none of that brought back the girl who once believed in forever. The woman who boarded a yacht thinking love was enough. I stood in front of the mirror, 8 months pregnant again, this time on my own terms. Watching the woman I'd become, no satin gowns, no diamonds, just strength. Wrapped in quiet defiance, the tabloids still whispered. The media called it the greatest scandal of the decade. But for me, it was the price of reclaiming truth. I used my new power to launch a foundation, one built not on wealth, but purpose. A sanctuary for women discarded by men in power. Women who were told to be silent, to disappear. They didn't, and neither did I. I rebuilt slowly. Every step forward felt like stitching together the pieces of a soul torn apart. Daniel, he came into my life quietly. He didn't try to fix me. He just saw me. Not the scandal, not the title, just Aurora. And that was enough. I let myself feel again. Not all at once, but enough to breathe, enough to believe. And when our daughter Serafina was born, I held her close and whispered. They tried to erase us, but here you are, proof that truth survives. She blinked up at me, tiny, perfect, fierce. The empire had fallen, but something stronger had risen in its place. Me, a mother, a fighter, a woman who would never be erased again. Moral: there are moments in life when you're pushed so far into the dark, you start to believe it's all there is, but then one breath, one heartbeat, one truth can pull you back. Don't let anyone write your ending. Reclaim the pen. Because the moment you do, you stop being the victim and start becoming the story they never saw coming. What did you think of this story? If you were in Aurora's shoes, would you have shown mercy or gone even further? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're rooting for her vote, top 10. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it moved you. More true revenge audio dramas every single day, right here on EN Reddit Story.